All right.
Good evening and welcome to the January edition of the Poetry Playhouse Open Mic. And tonight we're really honored to have featured three at Taos Press, which is one of the premier presses in the Southwest. They're known for exquisitely designed books and also a community of poets that is quite admirable. We've previously on our Zooms featured several authors from Three at Taos Press, including Lauren Camp, Dale M. Kushner, Gary Worth Moody, David Meischen, and Leslie Ullman. Leslie will be here again tonight, reading from her book, Little Soul and the Selves, along with Joan Ryan and Three at Taos Press publisher Andrea Watson, who will be reading from the book Blood Secrets. I want to turn things over first to Andrea to talk for a few minutes about the history of the press and what it's all about. Andrea.
Well, thank you, Jules and John, for such an exciting evening. Who knew poetry could be this exciting? Three at Taos Press was founded 12 years ago. The number 3 comes from our honoring the 3 or more cultures of Taos and New Mexico as a whole. As a small independent publisher, 3 was founded as a multicultural press, and all of our books are tightly themed. I like to think we take on the hard issues of what it means to be human, with all the joys and sorrows of that state. Some of the themes we've offered to our readers are hospice work, myth and fable, domestic, sexual, and elder abuse, controversial moments and figures of history, aspects of the feminine, health, mental wellness, and healing, and certainly a welcoming of the LGBTQI community. Above all, we hope that we are introducing our readers to cultures with which they may not have been familiar. At this point, we have published coming up to our 39th poetry book, which is 12 Days from Transfer by Eleanor Kedney. And I'm proud to say that many of our books have won awards for both poetry and design. Some of our upcoming authors are Catherine Durham Old-Mixon Garza, Robert Okaji, Jenny Grassel, Cindy Heuser, and Cyrus Cassells. When a manuscript comes to us, we always dwell not only on the theme, but that it fits our mission statement. And that is, we will treat each author with respect and creative encouragement to ensure that each book represents the ideals of that author in an artful and distinct way. I'm always cognizant that when an author sends us his, her, or their work, they're sending us their child. Often the manuscripts we received have been worked on between 3 and 10 years, and I see each manuscript as a collaboration between author and editor, always remembering to keep the poet's true voice. We could not do what we do, honor the beauty of the word and the beauty of the work, without our book designers, our web and square experts, our wonderful printer, and without the talent of our poets. When we publish a book, each author truly becomes a member of the Three at Taos Press family. And now I would like to introduce Joan Ryan, my co-author, who will offer the background of Blood Secrets and the time period in which it's set. Joan?
Thank you, Andrea. Before Andrea get into our poems, I'd like to share with you a little of the historical background of the hidden Jews of New Mexico, many of whom had no inkling whatsoever of their Semitic heritage for numerous generations. It starts back when the Jews first settled on the Iberian Peninsula soon after the destruction of the Second Temple of Jerusalem, and that's in 70 AD. And at times, Especially under Islamic rule, the Jews were treated as well or better here than elsewhere in Europe, where they were highly limited as to the work they could do and subject to frequent pogroms. From the 8th to the early 12th century, when Spain was ruled by the Moors, they were free, in fact, to own property, practice the trades and professions of their choices, and even to hold very high public offices. And from the 12th to the first half of the 14th century, when the Christians were regaining control, Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived fairly well side by side. But then their world changed radically. Resentment rose against Jews who were often tax collectors and moneylenders, and friars preached against them as killers of Christ. In Seville and other large cities, clergy-led mobs burned Jewish neighborhoods, slaughtered thousands of Jews, and forcibly baptized the rest. And to make matters worse, in the mid-15th century, bubonic plague erupted, and Spain experienced a long series of unusually harsh, long winters when crops failed and left people starving. And the series of plague epidemics at about this time, various estimates give us 25 to 40 or 50% of the population of Spain being killed. And for all these natural disasters, the Jews were frequently blamed. Also in these years, Jews were forbidden to own property, follow traditional professions like being jewelers or book publishers or book printers, or appear in public without wearing yellow badges. And to make matters worse, with the establishment of the Spanish Inquisition, false conversions, including those of people whom the mob had converted by force, became punishable by death. Technically, the Inquisition was not concerned with Jews who had not converted to Christianity, but only with the heresy of Christians. However, the Inquisition regarded all men and women who had been baptized, even at knife point, as Christians, and those Christians who were found guilty of continuing to practice Judaic rites and customs were treated as heretics and likely to be tortured and burned. Then, in the reign of Ferdinand and Isabella, a royal decree banished all Jews from Spain, and this was as of August 2nd, 1492, the day after Christopher Columbus left the harbor. The only alternatives were conversion or death. A few remained and pretended to convert, but they practiced their true faith privately. Other secret or crypto Jews sought to escape the Inquisition, hiding as Christians, pretending to be Christians by finding false papers and joining expeditions to the New World, which was centered in Mexico. Mexico needed settlers, and Spain was at first rather tolerant. But in 1571, a new Inquisition was established in Mexico City. And when numerous crypto Jews were denounced, tried, tortured, and burned at the stake, other false converts fled north into Nuevo Mexico, where the powers of the Inquisition were far weaker. Settled in small, isolated communities and living outwardly as Catholics, their descendants drifted away from their Judaic heritage, keeping only a few, if any, telltale family customs. And even among those who held on to some Hebraic ways, sons were often left ignorant of their faith, of their Jewish roots rather, because their families had learned from harsh experience that being circumcised could place them in mortal danger. With each succeeding generation, fewer and fewer descendants even suspected that a tradition of lighting candles on a Friday night dinner or cooking with olive oil rather than lard ever held any religious significance. In Blood Secrets, Andrea and I set out with Anita Rodriguez, who is not reading with us today, to explore the emotional and physical journeys of the secret Jews who 4 centuries ago fled to this state to escape the Inquisition, and those of their descendants who have recently discovered their long hidden roots. And here's Andrea back again to tell you about and read from the first section of our book.
Thank you, Joan. My section of Blood Secrets unfolds the imagined lives of two young women who carry a mystical connection. Rina, who lives through the terror of the Inquisition of Spain, and Reina, who exists in northern New Mexico hundreds of years later. Their stories, written over a 10-year period, have been a true labor of love. I learned very early in the process of writing about them that to connect two women who live 500 years apart required extensive research. And through that research, I discovered two very important things that became the underpinning of my section. The first is certain jewelers of the time period of the Inquisition secretly contrived a locket or an amulet that appeared quite plain in the front. However, the back held a tiny key or pin that, when touched delicately, formed a six-pointed star. And second, when the Jewish people were driven out of Spain by the Edict of Expulsion, also called the Edict of Granada, instead of being permitted to take with them gold or money or jewels, they were permitted exactly one piece of furniture. You can imagine the irony of trying to carry and then load on a great ship this amount of cargo. Many families thus brought nothing with them to the New World. This particular piece of furniture, a cabinet with its secret drawer, holds the locket that is the bridge our two young women walk across the centuries to find each other. Each poem is a back and forth dialogue between them. And now, Rina and Reina. Confluence of faith. She who is soul burying must not show the altar hidden in the darkest corner of the deepest house. Each arc of night, she is a broken star, candles lit against shuttered rooms, santos turned to face the wall. Sometimes she sweeps the house the wrong way, duendes hidden in corners. Blessed sunset of the sixth day, bowls of lavender, adafina in a copper pot, bread and wine tradition. At her door, the Virgin, but with parchment scroll furled inside, mystical words to touch. Beyond the blood flame of the Auto da Fe, secretly, daughter of 12 tribes, prays to Dio. She who lives to be reborn, Rina, whose name is song. She who is soul carrying does not know the cabinet still holds generations of prayer in a Kiddush cup. Each arc of day, she is a mended sun, ghost hands guiding her to light tallow candles, yet never knowing why. Sometimes she weeps in her house of whispers, shadows form unbidden. Trust her to bless the day of her only rest. Hamin twice cooked in gold broth, wafer and wine, communion. At her door, La Virgen, with relics and roses, unfurls her beauty, magical hands to heal. Beyond the blue-tip flame of another world, daughter of 13 stones, prays to Dios. She who lives within a dream, Reina, whose name is Queen. This poem is in the voice of Rina, and it is the history of the locket and of her father, who was a jeweler. The poem is set in Terza Rima. Locket, locket, unlock, lock. If you are the goldmaker's daughter, then yours is gem, locket, necklace, key, unlock it, falter. How could father be this reckless, dream beyond prayer to need? Choose a ruby so precious, it wells up as the truth and bleeds. The key marking his pride must stay hidden, heed what one heart half shows inside, engraving of his secret, each point a star with 6 watchful eyes. And this set begins the companion pieces about the cabinet. Make of this altar a secret prayer. This poem is in the voice of Rena. Once the room of stitchers bother me to press against the hidden door behind my father's books. 2 touches of a latch to the room that knows. The covered window, curtains fashioned of sad absence of starlight. I know the path to this cabinet. Spools wrapped in silver thread, needles in the green case, darning egg, slips of fabric, oils from India, and on the shelf, the silver goblet. Now I am the soundless latch. Help me to take down tallow, unlit, then lit. This gathering of flesh and silence. Father pours a reveat of wine. Mother offers braids of bread, whispered prayer. Breathing in the bidden, breathing out forbidden. Poem in the voice of Rena. Rumored to be a trastero, fashioned of hands blessed by God. From carving board to carving, 4 doors with intricate tracery, sunbursts, yet unforeseen clouds, braidwork frieze at top or below, mortise and tendon joints, simple and strong. Let me imagine a world inside. In one drawer, needful things, glass beaded pins, needle case of bone, leather thimble or eyelet awl, lucette for circles of lace. In another, all things prideful, linens folded and laced with lavender, amphora of scented oil, tassels of yellow silk, small pearl buttons, silk scarf loomed twice, and in one hidden drawer, a locket. I like to think this cabinet is benediction, transported from house to house, room to room, always placed with daughters and their daughters, then and now, a vault of heaven upon this modest earth. I thought that it was important in my section to indicate the horror of the Inquisition, so these 2 companion pieces may be very hard to hear. Poem in the voice of Rena on the death of her father. Oracle and lair. Hear the house, and hear the voices which are kindling of crows. Confessors and liars, cloaked in strap and feathers. Now the wind is a fist at our door. Recite. This is the number, is the Holy Trinity, is the angel charged to call out our woes. Every act in hiding is our unhiding. Muharram, forbidden. This is our only name. I light these candles for my father, bent to the book in secret. Rooms fashioned out of twilight. He who was taken, whose altar is nest and skull, den of inquisitors. Because Rena's poems are set in an agrarian place, I set this poem to catch fire, unfortunately, on a farm in a field. Oracle and prayer. My father was held hostage to fire. Burning lamp, burning field, turning stark. Kerosene once lit, flames from the feet up. Accident or immolation, who's to say? A window pane can only frame so much fire, and we ran toward the open field. Even God was watching. He ordained phosphorus, bone in red turning to white, like a bridal gown or a penitent groom, body anointed with stones. This is how burning worships us. A man on fire sometimes prays inside out, limbs genuflecting as if in devotion, golden sky lantern of hair, the heart still beating, even as skin draws away. And I'd like to end my part of the reading on a more helpful and happy note. This is when both Rena and Reina meet their loves or their lovers. Amadeo, I trailed a ribbon and you found a ribbon as I walked about the marketplace, stopping there or there. And when you stood above me and twined it round my head, no words. I remember your eyes were the cloak of cold heaven and your hair raw threaded indigo. Even with din of morning, I felt a thinness of sound and easing in of you. I gathered myself to ask your name, Amadeo, as in beloved. Perhaps an unfrayed wanting. You asked mine as return. Rena, I answered. There are 10 levels of prayer, you told me. Above them, and you paused at this, is only song. Your smile was a tapestry, half sandal, half satin. I wanted to take your heart, stitch it onto mine. Poem in the voice of Reina. Amadeo. You are the map I secreted away. I am the shape of the morning land. If you bear a legend, I cannot find it, yet the compass rose points north. The years we have known each other, contour lines growing always closer. Once past the twining road we waded across that swift current to the ruins, and then stood on the high bridge. I could almost touch the burning peaks. The noon we walked the far mesa, wildflowers swaying all around us. You picked vervain and bee balm, then held me in a reef of dragonflies. That was the way your skin felt, my hands along the ridge of your back. When you bent to cradle the sun, I found wild mica woven in your hair. You willed an abandoned adobe, our hidden place where doves rest. You always wanted the forbidden, so I dream of you there as paradise. At dawn, you showed me tamarisk, golden limbs untethered in this place. You knew to follow its watercourse. I only have known to drown in you. Thank you. And now Joan will read from her section of Blood Secrets. Joan?
Hello again. I'd like to start my section of this evening's readings with the poem that prompted Andrea to invite me to be part of this anthology. It stems a bit indirectly from the scrumptious beef and raisin-filled pastries my Chilean Aunt Edith brought to my Ashkenazi grandmother's holiday parties. Even back then, before I started kindergarten, I was a bit of a foodie, and I instantly fell in love with Edith and the combination of meat, fruit, and spices like cardamom, cumin, and saffron that marked her Hispanic Jewish cooking, which was both lighter and more exciting to my palate than my granny's Germanic cooking. Many years later, when I was busily researching recipes I could use for a Seder with some very food-oriented friends, I began looking at books on Sephardic cooking. And in The Taste of Honey, a collection of reconstructed recipes from the Inquisition period and stories of the men and women who were associated with them, I came across a recipe for 15th century style matzahs, along with a passage about an Angelina de Leon, who, on the evidence of just such a recipe submitted by her maid, was determined to be a false convert and was ultimately burned at the stake in 1503. And by the way, while the dry, unleavened breads I had previously eaten at Seder's had always seemed to me rather bland, the ones I made from the reconstruction of Angelina's recipe were truly delicious. Bread of affliction. Angelina de Leon, Spain, 1503. In haste, I roll and prick coarse rounds to bake unleavened, like the bland white wafers placed upon my tongue in the chapel where I kneel, as we conversos must to live here in Leon. These flat breads are made in haste in memory of the flight, and to evade Maria's glance as she carts in wood or lights our fire. For zealous eyes are everywhere, and our common foods, a simple stew with mint or chard, or the green gold oil we've pressed since desert times, betray us. A servant's word, a neighbor's whiff of saffron or cilantro is all it takes to bring us in. In Aragon, the king's own minister was seized for eating chickpeas at his Friday meal. He went into the fire. So why, for this dry bread, will I, Angelina, risk the flames, when so easily I bend my knee and have each child sprinkled at the font? I only know the smell of egg and honey comfort me. It was my mother's and her mother's way. As you'll see soon, food is a theme that draws me and seems to run through my poetry. But in this book, Angelina is simply an ancestor of my main speaker, Magdalena, a Catholic woman who, after she is diagnosed with breast cancer, discovers her hidden Jewish heritage through a DNA test that seemed to her at the time superfluous. For many years, it was believed that this mutation was peculiar to Ashkenazi women, but about 20 years ago, oncologists in the San Luis Valley, just about an hour northwest of Taos, found a high incidence among women of the Catholic Hispanic population and came to realize that they were descendants of secret Jews. My section opens with Magdalena receiving the letter that says she has tested positive for a genetic mutation or allele, peculiar to Jewish women, which makes breast and other female cancers especially virulent. Chosen. 100 steps take Magdalena from the post office across the Paseo. 200 more, think only of the counting, make them come out even, end at the iron bench in the old Anglo graveyard, where no family ghosts will look over her shoulder as she reopens the yellow craft envelope and stares at the blur of codes and numbers, trying to make sense of positive for the BRCA1 185 Del Ag mutation. At Jewish origins, she stops and rechecks the type on top of each page. It still stubbornly spells her name. The next poem focuses on the 2,000-year-old history of this allele, BRCA anomaly. Even earlier than you'd imagine, long before the conflagration spread from embers of the Juderia in Seville to auto de fe and expulsion. No, back even further, before the diaspora brought the children of Judah and Benjamin to Granada, in the years when Herod's temple stood on the mount in Jerusalem, not yet burned by Vespasian's legions, and the court of the women thrummed with music and dance, the mutation occurred. You might call it a copying error, no more than a typo. As a germ cell divided, the random change of one gene on the 17th chromosome of an egg or sperm that helped form a Hebrew child. A small deadly allele that makes breast cells less able to repair DNA damage, the genetics counselor explained. Passed down to descendants for centuries, even to daughters of New Mexico's high mountain villages, baptized and confirmed, whose first sign of this ancient heritage is only a nodule the size of a rosary bead. One of my favorite parts of writing these poems was imagining the different personas and homes of Magdalena's Catholic and crypto-Judaic grandmothers. Hence, Magdalena never noted at all before the DNA test. Family recipes. In Abi's kitchen, even potholders have ruffles. Bright flowered dishes, teacups, and bowls gleam from broad shelves. Girl cousins laugh as they bake biscochitos. Magdalena creams sugar and lard till they fluff while Marivelle measures flour and greases pans. The room smells of cinnamon and anise. Both girls have smudges of dough in their hair. Nana's kitchen is larger. Smells of orange peel and almond. China and glasses hide in cupboards, and the pantry door stays shut. Secret family recipes, pressed in dark-covered notebooks, fade and crumble. Granddaughters set the table and carry soiled dishes back to the sink, but are never allowed to cook. Nana's cakes make Magdalena think of fairy tales and dream of camel caravans to places with names like Samarkand. But in Abby's kitchen, she confides, I like your dinners better. Your papa's mother is a fine cook, Abby rebukes, then adds, almost too low for the child to hear, even if she makes her albondigas with beef. In Magdalena's father's family, boys were never informed of their Jewish heritage. And as in a number of crypto-Judaic families, the secret was passed down from eldest daughter to eldest daughter. So as a child, Magdalena couldn't really understand the hints her cousin Sophia, who is an eldest daughter on her father's side, drops in the following poem. Wild Roses. I'll show you a secret, Sophia says, as she leads Magdalena from behind the Marata to a wind-scoured field of rock and scrub, the old Camposanto de Dolores. Good girls mustn't visit because the owls are brujas and hungry ghosts rise like mist from the ground. But Magdalena still follows through rock and camisa to the gray stone marker with 2 stems of blossoms framing a name and date too worn to read, where Sophia confides, this is our great-grandmother's grave. Magdalena drops to her knees, traces her index finger along the outline of each carved flower, and stops on the one with 6 petals. After a pause, Sophia whispers, that's the secret. Roses only have 5. All the way home, she refuses to speak. From the 11th century on, Spanish Jews were largely confined to specific areas of ghettos, and the one in Girona was and still is referred to as a call. And I'm pronouncing Girona the way it is pronounced in Girona, and call is that the name that people in this particular area use for a ghetto. And my next poem is in the voice of one of Magdalena's male forebears who is locking the door of his ancestral home and leaving his call for the last time in 1492. Upon leaving the call of Girona, in the good years, our family lived well in this city as traders in wool or grain, butchers, tanners, dyers, and silversmiths, translators, poets, and printers of books, enjoying the king's protection as long as we stayed in our well-boarded houses for Holy Week, when students would gather on church roofs to pelt us with rocks. We lived on here in comfort, even after the law confined us to the dark, narrow streets of the call, with azure skies above us, and in spring, the perfume of orange trees wafting over the high stone walls, except, of course, for plague years, when peasants could not be prevented from rising against the poisoners of wells. Cut off from our trades, we managed as collectors of rent and taxes to keep our children safe in our homes, when clerics weren't inciting our neighbors against the killers of Christ. And even in the year of the massacre, when the Jews of Seville were slaughtered and the call of Cordova was raised, all but 40 of our people survived. But now the edict is clear. We must leave this call before August, when our quarter will cease to exist, heading I know not where, with only a handful of sapphires hidden in linings and hems. And yet, as I walk out the door, I turn the old key in its lock, remembering that here in Girona, a Jew could live well, when a Jew could live in Girona at all. And now I'd like to end my part of this evening's reading with a poem that borrows the title of our book, Blood Secrets. Nana's recipe for albondigas, Papa's lure for largemouth bass, the slope where Mommy finds her chanterelles, and the hidden canyon where Abby plucks choke cherries for her August jam. All families have their secrets, some passed down with smiles, and some in whispers. For your ears only, tell no one but your children, just for your oldest daughter. Some cost us oaths, like cousin Sophia's, place your right hand on the tomb and swear. Some we're left to guess, like why our Nana left the opal ring to my cousin when I was the October child. And others hide in our blood unnoted, like the gene that almost killed me. And thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to be speaking and reading to you. And
thank you, Joan. And next up, we have Leslie.
Hey, what a pleasure to hear those poems. I've read them many times, and I just love every time I get to revisit them. This is a little bit of a Jewish theme tonight, actually. My book started with a character that I invented the first day of an August 4 years ago, where I was doing a poem a day with two friends, well, actually several friends. And I start out with this character, and I called it Little Soul Begins a Series of Field Notes. And I realized this character could be a secret self of me, a kind of a half-wild creature, a kind of Artemis figure, shy, solitary, baffled by the world it has found itself born into, which indeed echoed my own experience in my resolutely normal, assimilated Jewish family in post-war middle-class America in the Midwest. I let this character inform all the poems I wrote that August, where I was desperate to come up with a poem a day. And at the same time, a good friend of mine, who's also a 3 Taos Press author, Dale Kushner, who has a beautiful book called M, she was taking a course in ancestral memory from a wonderful female rabbi. And I couldn't afford to take the course, but I asked her to feed me the homework assignments to see if I could use them to figure out something about my ancestry that I had no access to in my family, not through my grandparents, not through anybody. And she fed me a few assignments and I couldn't answer them. So I decided to let Little Soul try to answer some of them. And I didn't get super far with that, but I had a lot of fun with it. I'll read you one of those. But as I worked on this book, I realized that I also found myself responding to poems that to quotes from poems other poets had written where they mentioned the soul, like T.S. Eliot and especially Louise Glick, where I found myself wanting to argue with them because I was beginning to get a sense of the soul as something that mattered to me that wasn't what they were seeing. And so this book ended up also trying to be a little bit about what is the soul? What am I discovering the soul is? So even though I have a lot of personal history in there, I'm also investigating the nature of the soul. And the 2nd August, I revised those poems all year. And then the 2nd August I did this, I realized I needed to expand the book a little bit. And I ended up writing a series of a 6-poem series of soul making, 6 lessons in love, because I think love is a way our souls evolve, not often with pleasure, but certainly in important ways. And so that became kind of a turning point in the book. And then toward the latter half or third of the book, Little Soul got away from personal history and personal investigations and started thinking about things beyond the self. So the book does have a bit of a trajectory from personal history into other investigations. And I'll try to touch on all of those a little bit. I also want to say that even though I had the poems and I knew what I wanted to do, I didn't know how to order them. And that's where Andrea was incredibly helpful. And I said, could you just help me order this book? And, I'm usually good at this with other people, but I needed help. And she pushed me pretty hard and she made me work hard for at least a year, maybe more. And we got an order that we really liked. So I'm very grateful for Andrea's help, because I'm not sure if anybody else would have been willing to do that with me, but I'm very pleased with the book. And it's just a beautiful book. This is quilt art by a wonderful artist named Dottie Moore. And so it's just physically a pleasure to me to have in my life. So I am going to read one of Little Soul's attempts. So our Little Soul is kind of an androgynous figure. She doesn't feel like she fits anywhere in her family, which is how I felt, frankly. But this is Little Soul trying to answer one of the assignments that I couldn't answer myself. Third assignment, an attempt at revision. I learned to avoid firecrackers and cap guns, undercooked eggs, having our hair brushed by anyone but us, letting our toes touch lake muck, acting like a girl wanted our father to like us, being misunderstood. Criticism, how tenaciously it lingered, smoke from a grease fire, and so many ways to screw up. Too loud, too blah, hair out of control. Where's your sense of humor? Wearing something unbecoming. Too serious, thin skin, not smart enough, not fun, not agreeable, not enough. Little Soul wonders who of the ancestors might have hidden in wet fields and lived on stolen eggs, who wasn't taught to read because she was a girl, whose wild hair belied her tribe and led to exile, who wrote books that were burned, who was stoned for blasphemy or for miraculous healings or dancing with abandon, who learned to survive by erasure, by solitude, by keeping silent. Little Soul wants to rewire the selves, so schooled in caution. Maybe it wasn't about you. I should say Little Soul and the selves are all part of one person, but Little Soul is kind of the core that gets stronger as the book goes on. Okay. So I'm moving ahead into the series of soul making 6 poems on love. And this is one that kind of captures some of the essential lessons of love that make Little Soul become a little more itself. But Little Soul hasn't quite gotten there yet. This is called Borrowed. Say he is Pan with gentle hands, his eyes creased with mischief. He likes to roam at night, nothing but him and the stars, his blue gaze bright in his sleepless face. He says he wants to grow old with you, though he must keep you and have you keep yourself a secret. You know precisely at what point the pain will begin if he keeps coming around, calling your name softly in the pre-dawn stillness. Say he has kissed you once, then slipped away, flushed and dizzy, to the element he brought with him, the scent of night and the unsettling light of a sinking moon. Say you've made love once, and again he has vanished into the last tendrils of darkness. By day, he drives to work across the border to cut steel with a needle of flame. You can see him draping his arm along the truck's open window, his skin browning in the sun, and later treats kindly the woman he says he wants to stop living with. At night, your own house holds a throng of memories as echoes of other men who once thought you a discovery or the one person who understood them, find their way in along with grit from spring's first furious winds. Sometimes it's your ex muttering, worthless, glowering and refusing to talk, though he's told others he never stopped loving you. You left him and don't want to go back, but lately you curl over the part of yourself as though from a blow where love for him drove a deep root. And see how you turned and turned from that greenness until it dried, withered, and settled to ash. You trace its residue nights alone, while this other man is whistling or stirring gravy or washing the dog, seamless and easy in his double life. One morning, you're easing your skittery mare from the barn, tears filling your eyes for no reason, like blood washing dirt from a wound. When he appears in the doorway, the sun behind him, his hair where your hands may or may not rest, a bright nest spun against hard daylight. Say he is Mercury, Hermes, messenger riding the thermals. Say he's another crack in a heart that yearns as hearts tend to do in spring's restless weather. Perhaps this time it will leave a scar like soldered gold, seared, then annealed. Perhaps you hope the seasons finally will get through to you with their simple lesson, subtraction and replacement, the earth's loose skin stripping itself again and again. So here's where Little Soul starts to branch out a little bit into other things other than personal history. This is called Little Soul Dreams Polaris. Guardian of true north, lodestar, fixed point in a swirl of constellations, it alone holds the same view day and night as earth below and sky around it rotate in a clockwork swirl of magnetic exchanges, darkness and light passing through them in waves. Polaris holds steady in such surf, its eye presiding over the pole's vast whiteness, ridged and crevassed and mostly untouched. Earth could well be its most articulate neighbor, its own compass, each reflecting in the other's view a solitude absolute, primal and relentless. Yes, we exist, you in me, I in you. Unpeopled white speaking to night-lit stone over a distance no human eye can breach. A view absent of any trace of others' existence, save on some parts of the pole, preserved in ice and silence, a few shreds of tattered canvas, 3 tins of beans whose labels have worn away, a kerosene lamp, and a journal whose handwriting remains legible, sustaining, destined to remain unread. Little soul on earth's essential aloneness. Sometimes I am absent, so it seems, but deep in this absence are stones shaped by water that moves wherever gravity helps it find its way around trees and broken off pieces of mountain. Or in a handful of hearts carved and polished and left at my feet by tides. Sometimes I try to feel through their cracks and pinprick caves the braille of their histories, as though they could open new maps inside me. Nothing, not even my absence, will leave the shape of itself when I'm gone. But I learned to take this no more to heart than the field takes the weather, than the sky takes clouds, than earth took the long solitude of its birth into gases and rock. All summer it has greened beneath me and now drops apples into my hands. This one comes toward the end of the book, and it's called Little Soul and the Selves Are One. I don't know if you can see this, but it kind of goes all over the page. So it's kind of weird to read it, but it's a lot of fun. Little soul and the selves are one. Autumn in full burnish, we're flying down the steep hill into Valdez Valley, half a mile unchecked, like knowing no one cares anymore what we think, what we do. So why put on the brakes? No one watching if we crash, look funky in our helmet, say what we think without apology. We vanish into thrill, air like cold lake water, waking us up, thoughts sluicing through us, fresher title, earlier ending, a sequel. Benediction of cottonwoods, yellow laced with amber, canopy holding its own light over blacktop, a few fallen leaves, coins on old tar. Everywhere green bleeding to gold. Don't chicken out. Don't use the brakes. Mile after mile, we make our own fuel and accept what gravity offers now that we weigh nothing. And this last poem, I had a few arguments with Louise Glick in this book, but those arguments helped me realize what I wanted to say about the soul, because I didn't agree what she was saying about the soul. So I have two poems of that, but I'm reading you one of them. It comes at the end of the book. This is called As Wind Finds Its Way Through Walls. And what I'm taking from her, this is her quote: "Your souls should have been immense by now, not what they are, small talking things." Here I am arguing back. But look what they've had to overcome. Expulsion from immense privacy, a surround of warmth and easy nurture. As mammals, they emerged in a shock of light, sear of oxygen, their cries inscrutable to those eager for a time to receive them. Protest, displacement, nostalgia, maybe despair at losing a clarity they had no words for. These fueled the helpless wailing. First utterances, untranslatable, only understood by parents as animal need. No wonder they long to recover a lost language by remaking it phrase by messy phrase in superfluous attempts, adolescent scribblings, therapy, pillow talk, confession, insights seeking drift and depth over the years as they work their way towards reclamation beyond the single tenuous life. Why belittle the scraps, half sketches, drafts groping through flaw and foreshadowings of beauty? If a soul can't speak itself incrementally ample by such efforts, why do we struggle so to return? Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm going to bring John back in here, and Andrea
Thank you.
and Joan. That's so
Three superb readings, and I was wondering if we could all unmute and have a round of applause for our Taos Press.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I'd like to still take a couple of minutes for questions from the audience, as long as there's no Zoom bombers there. And then we'll move to the open mic. We'll probably go a little longer since we got a delayed beginning. So anybody?
and John, we had a couple more questions too to start off with.
I think those were pretty much covered in Andrea's talk. So I think, but if you have another question, feel free to ask it, Jules.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you. Well, I really appreciate your cover design and your artists, and I know you talked about that a little bit with these books. Do you want to highlight the artists or show the books or anything you want to say?
I did want to mention who, because people always ask me who works on your books, and I think it's important to honor them. So our collaboration always includes book designers, Leslie Cox of Field Design Associates in Arroyo Seco, William Watson of Castro Watson in New York, and Michelle Braverman of Brave Studio in Denver. Melissa Lind handles our wonderful website, and our printer is Cocktail Printing in Denver. And they and I have come a long, long, wonderful way together because they had turned out just exquisite books, and not every printer in the world could do that. Yeah, so that's what I did want to add. Thank you for asking that.
Oh, thank you, because they're gorgeous. They're works of art besides books.
Thank you.
Can I just show our cover, for
Yeah.
example?
Sure.
Oh,
Sure
it's
you-
incredible. Yeah, you should.
This is from, I don't know if you can really, I guess I'm not showing it very well. It's not showing up very well.
It's a
but
complex piece of art. It's hard to
Yeah.
show that.
yes,
Well, you know, look at the best thing to do is to go and look at your website and see it there and buy it. That's what you can do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And thanks, Jules. Thanks for that question, because the visual artists and designers and printers all need to be acknowledged.
And I have one last question, but
Yeah, go ahead.
for our audience and poets, what do you look for when somebody wants to submit to your press? I know I always tell people, look at what you're currently publishing, but can you fill us in on that?
I always say that poetry is about, sounds like 1960s, time and space. When I get a manuscript, I want to see the time that someone put into it, that they've read other poets, that they understood how possibly to put a book together, whether it's sectioned or the poems just flow. Those are the things I basically look for, and that they have a very tight theme, because we don't do anthologies. We don't really do personal narratives. It has to be about big themes. And for me, space is, poems are incredibly compressed on a page. And so in that space, I'm looking for poetic techniques, assonance, onomatopoeia. I want to see that they understand that lining is important, that basically they've done the very hard work that we've all done to get where we are. I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, thank you,
Yes,
Andrea.
thank you.
And I do notice that the books, you know, are more, they're more than just personal narratives. They always seem to bring in history, philosophy, science.
Yeah.
They're you know, they're approachable, but also erudite at the same time, which is a very difficult thing to carry off. And
Thank you.
and poets seem to do that. So I wanted to before turning to I loved Leslie's little soul dialogues, and but I wanted to just mention about Blood Secrets, that there was a terrific, I'm sure you saw a terrific exhibit at the New Mexico
Yes.
some
Yeah.
years ago on the crypto Jews,
Yes.
and there was a
Yeah.
local public television documentary, and I wonder if those informed the book at all, or if you had done most of your research before those came out, or.
Well, we definitely attended the meeting, and from the exhibit, we got a lot of information and one of my poems in the book actually is sort of taken from a list of items that were sold at an auction, and I turned it into a poem in the book. So yes, it definitely affected my part of the book, and I'm sure it affected Andrea's too.
Yes, absolutely. It helped me with a lot of detailing. I would like to say that my interest in the subject came about because of a book by Stanley Hortus called To the End of the Earth. It's a very important book. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So I just want to open it up for a couple more questions or
Yeah,
comments.
Scott, Norman Rosenthal has his hand raised. Scott.
Yeah, there's a woman who lectures on crypto Jews, etc., Rabbi Barbara Aiello. And she had made reference to Spanish conquistadores who were crypto Jews
Mhm.
bringing their belief system with them, and that this was actually adapted by a number of Navajo.
Hmm.
Now, I've looked for that reference. I have searched, I've
Yeah,
done what I can, and I find that nowhere but in Rabbi Aiello's statements, nowhere else is it to be found. And I wondered if you had any idea, if any of you had any idea.
I have not come across that at all. I think it's certainly possible.
It's a
But
fascinating.
I honestly, I don't remember reading about that.
But you know, there has been a lot of intermarriage in the Southwest over centuries.
Well,
So
everywhere.
anything's possible. Yeah. Mhm.
When one reads history, pat explanations for, it's this side or that side, as with the current
Yeah.
conflicts in the Middle East, they're absurd. And what gets me is how many people who are older and educated still fall into a pitfall that seems to be a plague in our times of seeing things oversimplistically.
Yeah.
And that's not, history just doesn't work that way.
Anyone else?
I'd like to just ask,
Holly,
Okay, Holly, you had your,
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
Um,
thank you. I love that. I've known about the crypto Jews for a long time and its history in New Mexico. It's like, this is such a special place where a lot of magical things have
Yes.
happened with such a rich history. And I was wondering if you guys studied any Ladino. So I don't know if anyone even remembers anymore. The last I heard, there was more just some prayers left that some people might know in Ladino.
I did study it because I needed names, and there were very specific Ladino names, first and last names. So I did look at that, and I think there may be a word or two in the sections, and there may be some in Anita's section, which is fascinating because it also focuses on Taos and northern New Mexico, and especially the graveyards and gravestones where you will see things on them. Is that a menorah on there? And you're fascinated by what appears to be a Catholic cemetery that has some Jewish headstones in it. Yeah.
Right.
But
Very
yes,
interesting.
yeah.
The Khazar theory of Ashkenazim ancestry, that there's also validity, but again, the way to understand it is not saying, okay, all Ashkenazim are descended from Khazar, but to understand that you have an element, and people will always intermingle.
Yeah.
that you can count on.
There's
will.
something of a crossroads in the Southwest.
Yeah.
Just as in southwestern Russia, where the Khazar, it's comparable.
I think there was one other person that wanted to say something. Was that? Or not?
Anybody else?
I have.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
was that?
I bought Leslie's book,
Oh, good.
and I've read Leslie's book, and it's just a wonderful dialogue. It's surrealistic in a sense, and the actual spatial room that she gives her poems is different than most poetic books that you look at. And she gave her poems room to roam, so to speak.
Room to
And
roam.
I just love the dialogue between the soul and the self. It was just a wonderful conversation that invites the reader in.
Yeah.
Thank you, Leslie.
I agree.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, inventing that character gave me freedom to enter things about my own background that I had never felt should be in poems. Like, who cares about this stuff?
Exactly.
Women especially are, feel like we should never talk about ourselves. Who wants to know anything about us? Even though we know better, but it's ingrained. And Little Soul was just this wonderful backdoor and was a character that wasn't completely me, which was so liberating, and it was such a playful thing to have. And then I could kind of go in and out of my own history in ways that I had never felt I could do before. I really appreciate your saying that, Hank. And I think it's good for any poet to know that there's ways to trick yourself into getting into yourself by the back door. And if you go into the front door, nothing's going to happen. And all your uncertainties are going to just silence you. But if you get a little trick, if you make a character, if you do something that lets you play and imagine, you're going to end up telling the truth about yourself in a way that you never thought you could do.
Yeah.
Well, I
Persona
just wanted
poems
to,
can be so liberating. They really can. I'm sorry, who was saying something?
I've been,
Veronica, sorry, go ahead.
so first of all, I think the three poets used persona.
Mhm.
And I think that the definition that Leslie just gave is what persona is. It's not some character far away from you. It's you inside the character that would act like this because you're you. And the other thing is the research, at least in this for Joan and Andrea, that they did the work to make these gorgeous poems and this back and forth. They did the actual work, which is so crucial in that kind of thing, that it makes each word mean something. And I just wanted to ask a little bit also. I thought the readings were just gorgeous. You're all gorgeous. About Anita, like, I know that she sort of wrote a more prose thing, and that her and her family have been here for many, many years. So just her contribution, maybe a little bit about that. So when you get the book, which I hope you'll get the book, you can see the sort of contrast and arc in the book.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I love that that we're inside that persona, that character. I mean, it's kind of a method acting thing, right? You know, that we have to go into ourselves to express through the mask. So yeah, thank you. Well, this has been delightful, and glad that you came back after the rather rude beginning. And Jules, did you have any final thought before we turn off the recording?
And do you want to say your website and where our audience can find books with Taos Press?
Yeah, you can find it on our website, obviously, www.taospress.com, and in certain independent bookstores, and also on Amazon.
Well, thank you. Thank you again. We loved having you.
Thank you so much
Thank
for hosting
you.
us. It was exciting.
This is really fun. Thank you so much. You
good.
guys do such a lovely series. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll turn off the recording. We'll get